But that's only one side of it. For me was the learning and being in the environment which actually helps me to learn and makes it necessary. And this is then why I felt like, yeah, Mexico is the place to be.
Off-Gassing, a scuba podcast with host Nick Hogel. A fascination with sharks would propel Marc Anderes into the underwater world. His first breaths in the aquatic environment came at the age of 13. A few years later, while on vacation with his family in Thailand, he would earn his first certification. Diving was an enjoyable hobby for him for years before a last-minute trip with his sister ignited his passion for the sport. Soon after, he would find himself diving every weekend and eventually find himself moving full-time into the industry. Please enjoy. Marc, how are you doing? It's this evening for you, correct?
Exactly. Evening for me, and I just checked your time earlier today. You're in the morning, right?
I am. I have my coffee. I am getting the day started, and I always actually enjoy starting the day with an interview. It's pretty nice because I kind of get the ball rolling, just get some coffee, get everything set up, and no, I've been excited for this interview because I know we were supposed to record when I was in Mexico. I apologize for there was the delay on my part. But I'm excited to have you on the podcast. Did you get a dive in today? Did you teach or were you guiding?
No, actually not. I had a day at the office, if you want to say so. I was preparing myself for instructor training, which is coming up over the next couple of weeks.
Cool. Well, I am excited to hear more about that. But my first question I wanted to ask you is, tell me how and why you became certified. Tell me about that first breath underwater, that first experience. What led to that moment? Was it absolutely amazing? Was it, I absolutely hate this? Was it, this is okay? Tell me all about it.
So how did I actually even think about or come up with the idea of diving growing up in a landlocked country like Switzerland? For me, it was always about the fascination of sharks. And also there, I don't really know how that came. None of my family really is involved in any water sports. But I always was fascinated by sharks. And then I figured as a boy, if I want to get closer to them, well, I guess I need to start diving at some point. So at the age of 13, it was a coincidence. I walked up to kind of a ferry stand with my mother. And it was about diving. And I said, I now really want to do this. And so she took me. We talked to the guys, arranged the first dive. And that was in the cold lake of Zurich in Switzerland. So no sharks around there. But I was kind of hooked at that point already. That was at the age of 13, but then it took, I think it was 3 years until we went on vacation to Thailand. And then my mother said, well, now you have the opportunity to actually get your certification done. And so I did. And in Thailand, so kind of first breath throughout the course, I must say I can't really remember anything about the course other than that there were 2 other students. At the end, it was only me, though, because one got claustrophobic. Visibility was so bad on one day, so got claustrophobic. And the other one had to throw up because of the motions of the waves. So I was the only student left. That's basically the only recollection I have of my open water class. Yeah, that's how it all started with diving. And from then on, I had quite a long break with diving because, as I mentioned, none of my family nor friends were anyhow involved in diving. And then I think the next dive after that was in Egypt in the Red Sea. Again, my mother asked me where I want to go for vacation, and I said, yeah, let's go to Egypt. We can do some cultural stuff, but I also can go and dive. And then it just got more and more over the years.
I'm just curious, where in Thailand?
Koh Samui.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So we did a round trip around Thailand. Started in Bangkok, I think, then the northern part, and then we did a week together with my younger brother and my mother. Yeah, and that's where I got certified. So as of now, I guess quite the classic getting certified on Koh Samui. Back then, it was not for diving purpose that we went there.
So I actually took my first breath in Thailand as well, but it was on Koh Phi Phi. And I still actually haven't been to Koh Samui, but I know that that's a very, very popular destination. A lot of people will end up going there. A lot of people get certified there. A lot of people dive there. But no, that's funny that the visibility wasn't that good, because usually, I mean, I think Thailand in general is not great, but it's usually not bad enough to where people will stop. So that's interesting.
Yeah, as far as I remember, it must have been a storm or something because we didn't even go out with the boat. So it was a shore dive, and then kind of on the shore, it was just kind of the sand and everything, and visibility was terrible. Yeah, and so my memory of my open water diving is literally that one threw up and one got claustrophobic. Can't remember any face of my instructor, of the other buddies, but this I remember.
So you said it was a little bit before you were able to start diving again. When did you kind of start to progress through the sport? Like, when were you able to take your next course?
I then spent some time throughout university in California. So I went on an exchange semester to San Diego, UCSD. And when I arrived at university, they told me, well, don't take too many courses because usually foreign students struggle a lot. And I felt like, well, I guess I can follow that advice. And so I didn't sign up for too many courses and ended up having a lot of free time. And I think I was 24 at that time. And yeah, not being busy with university, I tried everything, right? From wakeboarding, skydiving, I did a road trip, everything you do in California. And then actually shortly before I left California back home to Switzerland, I felt like, well, now really I'm getting bored, so let's do my advance. So that was then, and it was not mainly because of the diving, it literally was just because I started getting bored. So I did my advanced course in La Jolla. And looking back, I now regret so much that I didn't get into it more, because I would have had 6 months of great diving, right?
Yeah. No, I've spoke to a few people. I have not been diving in California, but I've spoken to a few people, and the diving definitely seems absolutely amazing. A little bit different than your tropical, warm water diving, but I hear it's just absolutely amazing out there. Just out of curiosity too, so when you were doing a road trip through California, where did you go? Because I'm actually originally from California. I've lived all over the state, middle, southern, the absolute most northern tip of California. So I'm always curious. And then what did you think of California in general?
I loved California. I think there's so many different things to do. And again, I was 24 at that time. And if I would go back to California, I think I would spend these 6 months very different, but I don't regret the way I spent them. The road trip, we started as a group of maybe something like 8 guys in Las Vegas. That was a lot of fun. We only spent, I think, 2 nights in Las Vegas, and I was quite happy when I could leave again. So after 2 nights, we headed towards Grand Canyon. It was me and 2 other guys, and my job was fairly easy. I just had to put in the navigation into the navigation system. But after something like 4 hours, we figured, well, we should be rather close to Grand Canyon now. But we weren't. And so I looked closer into the location I typed into the navigation system. And I figured that I put in Grand Canyon, I guess it was Avenue or something like that. And Grand Canyon Avenue is not even close to Grand Canyon. So we didn't go the right direction first. And this is basically how we started our road trip. So after, I think, something like 8 hours, we ended up being at Grand Canyon. Then next, I'm not sure if I get the sequencing right. Next was probably Death Valley, Yosemite National Park, San Francisco. And then it took us over a week to drive down to San Diego again. So Highway 1, and yeah, it was absolutely beautiful. Yeah, was a very good time.
No, that's so I've taken the one a few times. That is an absolutely beautiful highway. It's funny because I'm just recalling this, but one of not the last time I was in California, but this is just a random story. But there's a train that goes all the way up the coast from San Diego, or not San Diego, Los Angeles, basically all the way up to Seattle. and it's one of the most scenic train routes. Me and my girlfriend decided to do it in the middle of February, which was, looking back on it, it's like, we probably should have done it in the summertime. But so we took a train tried to take a train from Los Angeles all the way up, and it goes all along the coast, super beautiful. But we did it in the middle of winter, and we never made it out of California. The whole train ride's supposed to take like 36 hours. We were on the train like, I think, 38 hours. We didn't make it out of California, had to backtrack down back to San Francisco. I think we made it to like Redding. But yeah, it's something that I will have to do again. It's just kind of like a botched part of a road trip. It was a train trip, but we never fully made it. But it was a really good memory. We ended up just drinking a whole lot of alcohol on the train, just to make the time pass by. It was bad. There was trains falling all over the tracks. The food cart ran out of food.
Was it because of snow or?
Yeah. It was a really, really bad snowstorm, and it just fun, good memories. But sometimes those, like the messed up road trips, or the mistakes on road trips end up for like the best memories, right? You're like,
exactly.
We had this.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it was...
When I think about our road trip, it usually ends up with me thinking about the one job I had bringing us to Grand Canyon, right?
So obviously where you are in the sport right now, you had to have hit a point where you wanted to pursue becoming, an instructor, a guide, like making this a career. When did that happen? So, because there was a little bit of a gap between open water, advanced. When was like the next step after the advanced course?
I did dive here and there, but after my advanced course, I didn't yet kind of reach a point where I felt like I go on dive vacation. But whenever I had time on vacation, I felt like, there's a dive center, there's an ocean, let's go diving. But I was really not specific about it. And then in 2017, my sister and more so I would say her ex-boyfriend, they organized a trip to French Polynesia. And maybe, not sure about it anymore, 2 months prior, she called me and said, we organized everything ourselves, and the way we organized it, it ends up that we always end up having one spare bed. Would you like to join? Then I felt like, well, my fascination about sharks is still here, right? As of now, I know how to dive. I'm still fairly unexperienced, especially compared to the group of friends they were going with. But I felt like, I never thought about going to French Polynesia, but that sounds like a great idea. So we went for 3 weeks. We did some dives in Whakaarawa, Rangiroa, and Moorea. And it was by far the best diving I did up until then. So I came back from this vacation. And from then on, I spent all my weekends diving. And obviously not in the same conditions as French Polynesia. But I figured that we actually have quite a lot of lakes in Switzerland. And better than not diving is still a dive in cold, murky water of Switzerland. So that was when I really picked up diving, and I was quite happy that it was throughout summertime. The water is still cold at depth, but it was manageable. And then winter came, or October, November came. I realized it gets colder and colder, and I don't want to stop diving for, let's say, a half a year until the lakes warm up again. And so I took my dry suit class, and then I actually figured, conditions are even better in wintertime. And so from then on, I just kept diving, and then took a rescue course in Switzerland, took the dive master with the owner of the shop, who is now a good friend of mine. Yeah, and this is how it then progressed. However, being from Switzerland, even if we have a lot of lakes, it never really appeared to be a great choice of career. So there was a lot of steps from me just feeling like, that's a nice thing to do on vacation and in Switzerland on weekends, to, I think I want to pursue this as a proper career.
Yeah, I've had a few people from Switzerland on the podcast, and there definitely seems to be like a little bit of a thriving dive scene there. I'm trying to think. Martin Split is one guy. I don't know if you know him.
Yes, I did my rescue course with him.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Wow, that's so random.
I think we probably were how should I say, not only certification wise, but also with our commitment towards diving, we probably were at the same point and felt like, yeah, that's something fun. We enjoy doing it. But I never talked about it with him, but I also don't think that he was kind of that into diving at that point. And that changed quite a lot for him as well. So yeah, super fun fact that we did our rescue course together then. Can still remember the dive site we have been at.
Okay. Are you guys from the same area?
Well, we're both from Zurich, so Zurich is rather small, so I would say, yeah, we are from the same area. And we did, so that was, thinking back, well, not the first course, but I did some specialties such as the dry suit diver and deep diver and all these kind of things. But the rescue course was then the first, let's say, bigger course and progression towards dive master and professional diving I did with that dive shop. And not sure about him, but he, as of now, still works for that dive shop as an instructor. And I ended up helping out at that shop as well. So, yeah, we sometimes still are in contact, yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. Wow. Small world. That's super funny. Yeah, he was an absolute blast to have on the podcast. He was really funny. And I spoke to him before, I'm trying to think, it was a few months back, and it was before I went to Mexico to take the cave and to get into the rebreather. And he was just kind of giving me some pointers. We were kind of comparing notes on, why the rebreather we chose or whatnot. It was a fun episode. He was a good guy to have on the podcast. And I actually hope to have him back on. So you were saying that the diving got better in the winter in Switzerland. Can you talk about that a little bit more? Is it just less people, better visibility? Why was it better?
It's a combination out of different things, I would say. So obviously, I would say that's not only in wintertime, but you need to enjoy cold water diving. Otherwise, you won't be diving in Switzerland, or you just have a miserable time, I would say. As soon as you go to depth, I would say usually something like 15 meters and below, maybe 20 meters and below, it gets cold also in summertime. So that doesn't really change too much, I would say, or that was not a thing where I felt like, well, winter is better or summer is better. I was quite independent about that. Where it changes though is one thing, yes, you have less people, less swimmers, less paddleboarders, so it's easier to get a parking spot. Second is you have less divers, whereas I don't worry about other divers too much in general, because if you plan your dive kind of looking ahead of time, I think that's never really an issue. Also, the lakes in Switzerland, even though they're small, they're big enough for all of us. But visibility gets better. So visibility usually is just better in wintertime. If you go a little bit deeper, also it gets better. And when it comes to fish, in wintertime, you obviously have less, but it's on a very low level anyway. So that impact did not kind of make it better for me in summer, because there were a little bit more fish. Yeah, but it was just the atmosphere itself. And if you had this fog layer over the lake, you looked kind of back over the lake and you had the snowy mountains. And yeah, it's just the atmosphere itself. And in wintertime, I feel it's even more calming than it was in summer.
I like to ask this question because, especially people from Mexico, it's funny because I consider myself a warm water diver. Like, I love warm water. I love tropical environment. When I get to Mexico, not like the oceans over there, Cozumel or, in the ocean, but to me, the water is a little bit cold in the caves, right? Like, it's slightly cold enough to where I was even in a dry suit. And I know dry suit, like the type of dry suit I have, it's a tri-lam, so it's all about the layers underneath. But there was times where I would be cold by the end of a dive. I would just straight up be cold. To me, it's a little bit of cold water diving. But I haven't really done Switzerland cold water diving. Like, I don't know what it is in Celsius, but the lowest is like 48, I think is the lowest, and Fahrenheit is the coldest water I've been diving in. Do you still enjoy the cold water dives? Do you still try to make it? Or is it just kind of warm water dives these days?
No, so in general, I would say, and this is something which I think is amazing about diving, there's so much variety to it, right? And one aspect is the water temperature, but also the environment it comes with. So whenever I go back to Switzerland, I always dive. I always bring my entire dive equipment with me, and I always go diving. One is because it's a thing I want to do with my buddies from Switzerland, and we obviously enjoy having a coffee before or afterwards and just talk, but also the diving itself. So yeah, I still love doing it. However, when we descend, there's kind of when we hit the thermocline, where it then literally drops from, let's say in summertime, maybe from 20 degrees Celsius to maybe the first drop, not even sure about it anymore, to 10 degrees Celsius. That's usually where I tell my bodies, well, you just need to give me a second there, and I just need to adjust. And this is actually very interesting, right? I got into cold water diving early enough, and I did it so often that it appeared to be normal to me. And of course, you can always feel how your cheeks get cold, and that kind of this thermocline kind of hits, but I never gave it too much thought. And when we went back to Switzerland, that was 2 years ago, I took my girlfriend diving in the Swiss lakes, and she only did cold water diving so far. And we didn't make it through the thermocline because it hit, and she said, no, not doing this, we can descend again. And so since then, I'm just way more aware of it. And it's interesting how I need more time to adjust getting through the thermocline, especially on the first 2 or 3 dives, and then I get used to it and can handle it again. But I still enjoy it very much. But as I said, it's not necessarily the cold water, because I would lie if I would say I like to be cold, but it's the variety of the dives you get in, right? And once you are dry suit certified, there's nothing you can't dive in the world. There's so many options. And we talked about, for example, the kelp forest in San Diego. Of course, you don't need a dry suit for that, but there's other areas, and I would definitely use a dry suit in California. Then I did some diving in New Zealand, where you have this mix of some tropical fish and kind of warmer currents, but you still have the kelp forest. There's just so much to see. And being able to do both warm and cold water just opens up a whole new world.
Bringing it back to Mexico, how did you end up in Mexico? How did this all come about?
The first step to all of this was obviously that I, at some point, decided to leave Switzerland and make diving a career, right? So I moved from diving as a hobby, doing it on weekends and doing it in evenings or even before work, to making it my job. And I did, well, in Switzerland, I would say most of the people have an office job, and that's what I did my entire life. And then at some point I just felt like, no, on the one hand, I'm tired of my office job and the environment I was working in. And on the other hand side, I also said, well, I have one life and I'm just living it for myself, and I don't do it for someone else. It's not for the CV, it's not for the career, it's not for the money. I just live my life for myself, and I should spend it following my passion. And so my passion obviously was diving. And so I quit my job more or less from one day to the other. And then, I thought I will give it a try. And just because you do diving as a hobby and it's your passion, that doesn't mean that you necessarily enjoy to work in diving, right? So I also was prepared to go back to Switzerland and get into an office again and just keep doing it as a hobby. But I moved to Honduras, to the island of Utila, and everything worked out great. That's where I did my instructor course. I was lucky enough and there in the right time that they hired me after I did my instructor. And so I spent my first almost 1.5 years on Utila. And as a vacation, me and my girlfriend felt like, let's go to Mexico and do cave training. So we came here, I did cave training with ProTech, and 10 days later we moved here. So that was how I ended up in Mexico.
That's awesome. I love how it's funny. It's like, oh, let's go take a vacation, but let's go train. You know, I love how that ends up.
Yeah.
I do the same thing, where it's like not necessarily a vacation. I'm like, hey, let's go put ourselves through some tough times on our vacation. You know, that's super funny. So tell me a little bit about the time in Honduras. I'm sad to say that I have not been. I obviously know about it. I know there's the I can't remember the name of the school, but there's that. Which school did you go train at?
I trained and worked at UDC, Utila Dive Center.
Yeah, Utila. Yeah, so that's very, very well known. Yeah, so tell me a little bit about the
Yes.
time in Honduras and just kind of the diving there, the atmosphere, the whole experience.
It was great, right? In general, also now, and it was just yesterday when I talked to my girlfriend and said we sometimes really miss the island life. So I arrived there early January. It was kind of in the middle of COVID still, I would say. So it was fairly calm and not too many people. But also everybody there is there for diving, and a lot of the people arrive there by themselves. So it's a small community, everybody has the same interest, and a lot of the people have interesting backgrounds arriving on the island by themselves. So you arrive, and after 2 or 3 hours you feel like, yeah, I'm already part of the community. There's nothing to organize because, well, you're just there. The apartment just happens because someone is looking for a roommate, and then you feel like, yeah, well, sure, we can do this together. You're at the dive center, and this is your family for the time being there. And this is how it all started. And then I did my instructor training. We had an amazing group of instructor trainees. And then just one thing kind of fell into place after the other, right? So after the instructor training, I got hired. And UDC is very well known for kind of the classes they teach, right? So it's less about fun diving, but a lot of classes back to back, from open water up to staff instructor, technical courses, etc. And so there was a lot of learning for me. The dive shop itself is organized in a I feel perfect way. And so it was very interesting to me to not only see the diving side, but also how things were organized and managed, etc. So yeah, it was an amazing time. Looking back, for me, it was mostly about the island life, right? I lived in Switzerland where everything is perfectly organized and everything works just the way it should be. But it's a city, and people are well, it's a city. Zurich was the city I lived in. And it's stressful, and it's all about work, and everybody thinks about their career, etc. And Utila is the pure opposite. And I think that's just exactly what I needed at that point in life.
So when I was looking at Dive Master training, I actually even emailed them at one point, and I started talking to them about going down there because I had met a lot of people that trained there that became, started their professional career there. And I don't know why. Well, I mean, I know why I didn't end up going there. I ended up going to Indonesia. Like, Indonesia it will always forever be in my heart. It's like my favorite place in the world. Malaysia is up there now too. No, I ended up finding this place in Indonesia, but Utila Dive Center, right? Yeah, Utila Dive Center. I wanted to go there because I felt that, and it seems like it stands true, that it's such a great place to build your network. Kind of like you're saying, everybody kind of converges there, and then you end up meeting these different people that go out into the industry all across the world, and then now you have contacts all across the world, and it seems like it was. Yeah, it seemed like it would be an absolutely great place to network, and I don't regret where I went because I absolutely still love that place. Bunaken is probably one of my favorite places in the world, but it's definitely a place that I'll need to make, especially because being from Texas, it's not that far. It's a lot closer than Southeast Asia. But so I'm curious. So took a trip to Mexico, did some training, and then 10 days later, you just said, we're moving here, huh?
So yeah, we did training, and my girlfriend, she didn't really work in Utila because she didn't want to work as a dive professional, because she said, no, I just want to do this for fun. And the internet connection and options in Utila are very limited. So she just kept herself busy, and she's very good with doing so, with volunteering and helping in different projects, etc. But after this 1.5 years roughly, she felt like, well, I'm actually ready to work again and to maybe have a change in scenery. So first of all, she was open to move somewhere different. But I obviously said, well, I have a great setup here in Utila. I don't give up something which is so amazing and I was thankful for. But when we booked our training in Mexico, we didn't even really think about this. But then we took training, and she actually said, I just take my side mount class. And then I will see how things go, but I'm not really interested in cave diving. And she thought it was too serious for her, and that's nothing she wants to do. She ended up being a cave diver as well, because she just loved it, and Jake, who was the instructor, did a great job with making her feel comfortable, etc. And so we went through the entire class together as a body team. At the end, for her, it was more the experience of Mexico and being kind of in a, how should I say, in a city again and have more options, proper internet connections, no power outages every week. And for me, it was the diving, right? I did book, we arrived in Playa del Carmen, and I did book, I think it was 1 day of cavern diving before our class started. Because my girlfriend said, well, we need to arrive a little bit earlier because we have to figure out what we do with our dog. And I said, well, I guess it's enough if you figure out the dog and I go diving. So I was already hooked when I did my cavern guided diving before we even started training. And then throughout the training, it just got better and better. And I realized there's so many things to learn and get better with. And yeah, to me, Mexico just seemed to be the place to be. And so as my girlfriend was happy about moving, it only took me kind of to finish the training. And I flew back to Utila and said, well, guys, tell me how much longer you need me, and then I'm gone. And that was 10 days, yeah.
That's awesome. So here another question that I'm always curious that I like to ask, because I know for me it was a little bit of a tough transition because I had like a very big recreational background. So because I took my initial side mount training in Mexico, and when I got there, I kind of like a lot of people, I felt that my propulsion, trim, buoyancy, I felt I had it pretty good, right? Like until you get to Mexico and you realize that, wow, do I even know what I'm doing? And so it was a little bit of a learning curve for me. Where were you at the time of training? And was it a big learning curve to get? Because obviously going from, non-overhead, open ocean diving to where now you're in the overhead, now these skills need to be really up to par. Where were you and how was that transition for you? I mean, were you already good and so it was kind of just like a breeze, or was it something that you found quite challenging? Like, I guess tell me about that whole experience.
I guess it depends on when you would have asked me this question, right? Asking me this question before I got to Mexico, I would have said, yeah, I think I got this, right? I was a technical diver. I'm full Trimix certified, and that's what I enjoyed doing in my free time in Utila, and I tagged along on as much technical dives I could, and that started to be my passion. So I felt like, yeah, I kind of got this figured, right? And then, yeah, you get to Mexico, and I think I will never forget my first time descending together with my instructor, who was Jake. Yeah, I looked at him, and I was good enough to have the awareness and to look at him and be like, yeah, I have not figured this out. Because it was just a very, very different level. And this at the end, well, of course, it's the caves which are amazing. The environment is great. It's something not too many people get to experience. And on a day off, I sit in the car and feel like, yeah, where am I going, right? Kind of, and I do bucket list dives just on a random day off. But that's only one side of it. For me, was the learning and being in the environment which actually helps me to learn and makes it necessary. And this is then why I felt like, yeah, Mexico is the place to be. And I can remember talking to my girlfriend back then as well. And I told her about kind of the dive shops I would like to work for, and yeah, that I felt I was not experienced enough, etc. And then she just said, but well, Mark, right, at UDC, you kind of you knew what you were doing. You were considered to be a very solid diver. If you now move to Mexico and go to a shop like ProTech, you're at the very end of the food chain again. Are you ready for this? And then I said, yeah, that's actually what I want, because this is how I think I will learn most. Yeah, this is how it happened, and still nowadays, some days I feel like, yeah, that's exactly where I put myself.
To be honest, I feel like sometimes that's the best thing somebody can do is if you feel it you're at the top of your game to go and start, put yourself in a different mindset, a different position, you're only going to create a better atmosphere for yourself at the end of that journey. So that's absolutely amazing. And I guess that'll lead up to my next question is, so you obviously were training with ProTech before you started working there. Tell me about the story of ProTech. Like, were you looking for shops, found ProTech? Obviously, ProTech is very well known. It's like, okay, I want to train here. And then talk about your progression to actually starting to work there.
I ended up with ProTech basically based on my research I did. What I thought was very important, and I guess you went through the same process yourself, right? You want to train with someone when it comes to cave training who does this on a daily basis, right? Who teaches kind of cave diving all year long, and they know what they're doing. They go and do explorations by themselves, so it's not only about what they read in a book, but real life experience, etc. And this is how I ended up finding ProTech and then signed up with classes and did all my training. At the end of training, when I said, well, I just go to Attila and grab my bags and come back, I didn't have anything lined up, right? I didn't really knew what I got myself into when it came to administration and financial barriers, maybe. So that first portion was pretty rough, but I had enough confidence, not because of my diving, just because of my confidence on how things work, that things will work out somehow. And so I just sticked around ProTech, and I did book guided diving with other people, with Aria. I think you did part of your training with.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so this is how I got to meet her, because she was my guide to the very beginning. And so I just tried to kind of get to know the community, get to know different jobs, also see different ways of how things are done, etc. But I obviously was very close to ProTech always. And Jake was my instructor throughout the class, and he stayed in contact with me and said, oh, if you ever need to get to a dive site, because I didn't have a car back then, you can always hop into my class as long as you stick to our schedule, etc. And by the way, we just hired someone new, and she might be happy about having a dive buddy anyway. And that was Maria, right? So I got to dive with Maria from the very start on. Yeah, so I was always very close to ProTech, and Jake asked me about my plans and said, yeah, what do you actually want to achieve here? And what are you here for? And I said, well, I'm looking for a job. And he says, yeah, maybe ask ProTech. Maybe they will have something. So I did. I got into an interview with the manager, and then they have to think about, first I was hired as a freelancer, if you want to say so. They didn't want to give me a contract because they said, well, it would be unfair. We're not sure if we can offer enough work for you. And I think I worked as a freelancer for 3 days, and then I got a contract. So that worked out pretty fast. So that was the transition then from freelancer to full-time employee.
There is 2 ProTech locations, Tulum and Playa. Is it not really you're working in one, you're working in both? Is it if somebody is needed in Tulum, are you headed down there? If somebody's needed in Playa, is somebody heading up there? How does that all work out?
You could say that as an instructor, you have a home base, right? We have a part of the team living in Playa, part of the team living in Tulum. And then obviously if there's work popping up in the Playa shop, the instructors from Playa will cover it first if possible. However, the Tulum shop is a little bit bigger than the Playa shop, and therefore the Playa instructors will more likely drive to Tulum and get work done there. Also, Tulum is just a little bit closer to all the caves, etc. But yeah, you kind of have a bias by where you're living. I also am happy driving to Tulum and exchange with the friends down there, see clients coming back, see the office stuff back there. So I don't really have a preference, but I live in Playa because I just prefer Playa over Tulum.
So one question I always like to ask, and I know you've basically kind of been answering this throughout since we started talking about ProTech, but ProTech, it's very well known, probably one of, if not the leading shop in the Mexico area. Why ProTech? So if somebody's going to come and train, why choose ProTech?
I might be a little bit biased when it comes to this. For me, well, I think the beauty of it is I can say why I chose ProTech as a student. Some of it obviously still valid why I wanted to work for ProTech then at the end. It comes down, I would say, to the size of the team and also to the experience involved, right? Now, not out of a student's perspective, but out of a instructor or instructor trainee perspective, it's super valuable having a lot of people around you. All of them are super passionate, but they have different focuses. Even though everybody goes exploring, for example, some are more passionate about exploring. Others, though, are super passionate about teaching. Then we have Patrick, who is involved in developing equipment and obviously has tons and tons of teaching experience. We have people being here in the area for something like 20 years, not sure about that. So there's just so much experience, so many different backgrounds, everybody's super passionate about it. And this is very valuable. There's different characters and you can learn from everybody in a different way.
I'm just curious, and I know there's probably so many, and I don't want to ask this question, but do you have a favorite cave, a favorite dive that you like to go on? Like you have a day off, you're going to go head out and do a dive for yourself. Where would you go?
I just made an Instagram post this morning and I wrote something like my favorite kind of cave as as a caption under the photo. And the cave was Chulo, which is very well known for the Chulo to Caterpillar Traverse. Not sure if you got to experience that one. And I wouldn't say it's my favorite cave, but what I like very much about caves is kind of when they're very white. This white, crumbly rock. So usually saltwater passages. I don't need kind of the decorations. I like decorations. It's something nice. But my favorite passages are probably these white saltwater tunnels. Tortuga has a very nice section of it called the Glory Run. Yeah, but again, I think it all comes down to the sheer variety diving has to offer. And it's the same with cave diving, right? You have been here for long enough to realize, well, it's not just wet rocks, because the wet rocks in one cave look completely different than in the other. What amazes me even more is you can do one jump to a side tunnel and the cave looks completely different, right? And this is what fascinates me, next to a lot of other things which fascinate me in cave diving.
It is such an amazing place, especially like you were just saying, you can go into one cave, and this one dive in particular, I'm so bad with names, and it's a very popular cave, but you go in and it's like black, it's just really dark, everything, like the walls just like eat up the light. And then we went to this, it was basically this side passage, and you go in and then it was just like this white tunnel. It was so amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Like just it totally blew my mind, because I was just like, oh man, you're in this weird mindset because everything's dark and it's just eating up the light, and then you come in and it's just like the light is just really brightening everything up, and it was just so absolutely amazing. Yeah, I love it. I can't wait to be able to make it back. And it's funny because it was something that I never thought I would enjoy. Like, yeah, I'll try out this cenote diving, this cavern diving, and just ended up like, holy cow, this is absolutely amazing. But my last question I would like to ask you, I always like to end off on some sort of advice question. Somebody that is they're heading to Mexico and they want to get into overhead diving. Maybe they have their training plans, their cavern or their intro or even their full cave. What is the best piece of advice that you could give to that person that is about to start their journey into the overhead?
Well, there's different things, right? So the one thing is the skill base, I would say, right? And we talked about it before, how humbling it also was for me getting here and then seeing people what really is proper trim and seeing people really being in control of their fin kicking. So until you get here, I guess it's very difficult to gauge, right? But of course, in your basic training, you can be kind of more focused on the fundamentals, so buoyancy, trim, positioning, fin kicking, or you can not really work on these. So no matter which diving you consider, and that's not related to technical or to cave diving, I would highly recommend focusing on these basic skills, because once you understood the concept and once you really master buoyancy, trim, and positioning, you realize how much more enjoyable things become. Not only in cave diving, but in your daily diving, if you want to say so. So this is something I would for sure focus on when or before you get to Mexico. Because also, and I'm sure you can relate to this, cave diving itself brings so many new skills with it, dealing with a primary reel, installing jumps, doing the navigation, dealing with zero visibility procedures, etc. So if you then still have to worry with buoyancy, trim, and positioning, well, then it just becomes very hard, right? So this is one piece of advice I would give. The other one is to just enjoy, right? Enjoy being a student. This is what you sign up for, so that you learn, that you do mistakes, that you hopefully learn out of them. And I still absolutely love being a student, and I take as many classes as I can. I just retook a cave class, not because it enabled me to do more. It was basically an intro to cave class. I took my cave 1 class with GUE, but I just enjoy seeing new perspectives, new ways of doing things, maybe doing mistakes again and learning from them, and yeah, just enjoy that process.
I'm actually just curious, how did you like the Cave 1 with GUE?
It was amazing, right? So for me, how that actually happened is that a friend out of Switzerland, he asked me and said, well, I did my fundamentals, I want to do Cave 1, do you have an instructor you could recommend? I said, yeah, of course, I do have. And so I did. He signed up with, or I got him into contact, and then he signed up with Cave 1, or for Cave 1 with Danny Riordan. And the longer I thought about it, I think I would be pretty jealous if he gets to take that class after I got him connected. And so I signed up for the class as well. So there's different reasons for me why I took the class. First, and I think most importantly, because I wanted to learn from Danny Riordan, just soak up his experience he gained over the last 30-ish years. So that was amazing out of a student perspective. Also, what was interesting for me, I'm in the process of becoming a cavern instructor, and as it obviously covers part of these topics, I felt like it will be very interesting to see how he teaches it. There's also other ways of doing it, right? We in ProTech are very particular about certain things, and then you see, oh, other teaching approaches focus on other things more and on these things less, right? And so it puts things in perspective again. And I think that's always important, that we are open-minded and we think about kind of how other people do things, or why does someone teach navigation differently than I do. And so it just starts getting you thinking. Yeah, overall it was great. I can highly recommend taking other classes with new instructors, new agencies, just to get new input of how things could be done.
So I'm curious because I also am very much the same way. I really, really enjoy taking courses to get different perspectives, and I always feel like it keeps you on your game. But I took a fundamentals class. I kind of started down the GUE route. I don't know how far I'll end up going, but I took a fundamentals class last year, and I don't think it'll happen this year, but we're planning on doing a Rec 2 course. So it's kind of like their advanced course. I would call it maybe like an advanced on steroids, and obviously I don't need to take the course, but I definitely think that I'll get a lot of value out of the course. So, and I'm very curious to see, because they kind of start the line laying techniques in there. And I was thinking, I'm like, oh, maybe I'll make it to a Cave 1 just to kind of see how they do it differently. Or I think out in my area, I think it would be more beneficial to do a Tech 1 because, me being in Malaysia, there's a lot more ocean dives, deeper dives, so it might be more beneficial. But I am just kind of curious to see the differences on how, is there major differences, or is it kind of the same thinking, just done in a different way, I guess. So no, that's cool. That's an awesome thing to hear, that you're still continuing to be a student, because I definitely think that there's a lot of people, I don't want to say they plateau, that's not the right word, but there'll be a lot of people that hit that instructor level and they're like, okay, I'm done. No more courses for me. And I think that's kind of a sad thing to hear sometimes.
Yeah, that's a good thing about being in Mexico. It's or in this area of Mexico as well. It's very hard to reach that level because I can't imagine someone standing at the cave and looking around and be like, guys, I just got this. Because there's always someone who knows things better. There's always someone who has more experience with things or has a different way of thinking about things. And yeah, this is the amazing thing about being here. I don't think there's ever a ceiling to your learning, if that makes sense. And there's no limits to your diving, right? If when my family shows up here, I can take them cavern diving. And me, myself, I do still enjoy cavern diving very much because it's, again, different. But on the other hand side, you could do deep CCR, DPV exploration projects. And so there's absolutely no limit to it. And I guess whenever you should be in a place where you feel like, yeah, I think I have figured this out, you can just add something more to it. And there will be always something, I think.
Well, Marc, I absolutely appreciate you coming on to the podcast. It was great to hear about your journey, your story, and hopefully I'll be able to make it back to Mexico sometime sooner rather than later, and we can get in the water and get a dive in. But I absolutely appreciate you coming on to the podcast today.
Thank you for having me, Nick, and it would be a pleasure to see you back in Mexico.
Off-gassing, a scuba podcast.